Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Good morning, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the founder and host of the Blended podcast, which is the newest podcast on diversity and inclusion. And I am really, really happy to be here with you today. We have a ton of stuff to cover on Thoughts and Coffee today, so I think we are just going to get started. So, we have a brand new episode happening on Let's Talk Supply Chain that we released yesterday with Source Day. And so I got the chance to sit down with Tom Keeley, who is the CEO of Source Day, and we dove into exactly what Source Day does. So, what exactly do they do? Why should we care? What do they do for their customers, and what can they do for you as well? So go and check that out. You can check that out over on our website, letstalksupplychain.com, or wherever you subscribe to the Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast. It's a really, really good one. And Tom is extremely knowledgeable in supply chain and procurement. And so I can't wait to share that with you as well. Plus, we have some brand new events that are coming up. So what have we got coming up? We have got Eric Johnson's Log Tech Live. That is happening this Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. His show last month was amazing. We got some really, really great feedback from you. Thank you to those who actually showed up and watched it and participated. And he's got a really amazing guest coming up on Friday as well. So stay tuned for that. What else have we got? We've got a LinkedIn Live event with Easy Mile. So we're going to be talking about real automation for real supply chains. AJ, can you put the link to register for this in the comments? And you can go straight there and click attend, and you will be notified when we go live at 10 a.m. Eastern on September 23rd. What else have we got? We've got Manifest coming up in January, and that's pretty much it for the events that are happening right now. I'm going to tell you about an event that's happening next week, and that's who our guest is today. And so I will tell you about that in just a minute. I want to cover a few things. So first of all, we have our winner for our giveaway for this month, and it's Imtiaz. And here he is. He's joined us in the audience, and his Let's Talk Supply Chain mug is on its way to India as we speak. And we give away this mug every single month to somebody who has engaged with our live shows or engaged with us on social media the most. And so you want to get on that. You want to be commenting on our live shows. You want to be participating in our social media, because we will be giving away another mug by the end of September as well. We also are giving away a free gift on Instagram. So go and check out Let's Talk Supply Chain on Instagram. Send us a DM. So send us the letters LTSC, and we will send you our free gift. So go and do that right now. And then some other things that we've got going on. We've got some really incredible supply chain merch on our website. I don't know if you know that. Some people do, some people don't. Some Let's Talk Supply Chain merch, some supply chain merch. So go and check it out. It's under shop at letstalksupplychain.com. And then if you're a brand that wants to work with us here at Let's Talk Supply Chain, we want to work with you as well, because we're creating unique concepts. We are creating unique content as well. So if you're a brand, get in touch, listener at letstalksupplychain.com. We'd love, love, love to talk to you. So now it is time for me to introduce you to our guest for today. And our guest has her very own event. She is talking to us right before she starts setting up for this event, which is a huge undertaking. And I am super grateful that she is here with us today, because I know she's got a lot going on. But the event is called Imagine, and it is happening in person in Tennessee from September 7th to the 9th. And you can actually go and register at the website, supplychaininsightsglobalsummit.com. And so I hope that you're going to register and go and attend, because she's got some amazing speakers, and we can talk about that in a minute. But let's bring her up. Laura, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I've got my coffee. Let's rock and roll. Let's talk all things supply chain.
I've
Yeah.
got my coffee too. I've got my Harry Potter mug today, not my Let's Talk Supply Chain mug, but I went Harry Potter today on
I've
mine.
got my standard hotel. Let's grab a cup of coffee mug.
So tell us a little bit about the speakers that you've got going on at your event next week. And also, for those that don't know you, you might want to do a little bit of an introduction, but I'm sure there's not a lot of people that don't know you.
Well, I'm been in supply chain for 50 years now. I've 20 years as a practitioner for companies like Procter& Gamble, Clorox, General Foods, built software for 10 years, and I've been an industry analyst for 20 and about 5 years in software marketing. So I basically say consultants know the answers and analysts are trying to figure out the questions.
Yeah.
And so I have 330,000 people that follow me on LinkedIn, and I use that panel to basically field bespoke research. And I do research projects and I write about it on a blog called The Supply Chain Shaman. And I really write for business innovators. So when I was at Gartner, I wrote for IT, and I really don't like writing for IT. I like writing for business leaders, and I like writing for business leaders that want to be innovators. So that's what I do. And I give all the research away, and I have a podcast called Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights where I interview business leaders. So that's what I do.
I love that. And you bring so much to this industry. I mean, Laura, I have looked up to you for so long. We had you on our Woman in Supply Chain series, so I got to learn a little bit more about your journey. And you and I have connected in so many different ways, I think, over the last couple of months. And just super excited to have you here. So do you want to just quickly talk about maybe some speakers that are going to be at your event next week and what people can actually expect from your in-person conference?
Yeah, so it's really a facilitated workshop. And what I do is I bring the brightest technologists and people that want to be business innovators together. And I facilitate a visual workshop where we draw and we try to imagine supply chain 2030. And I handpick all the speakers. So a lot of people get mad at me because
Right.
there are a lot of software companies and consultants that want to be on my stage. But nope, I handpick all my speakers. And so we start out imagining manufacturing, and I've got a digital innovation case study from Schneider Electric. I've got a presentation on 3D printing and how we move from 2D to 3D drawings. And then Bayer's going to talk about how we reach the right balance between innovation and standardization in manufacturing. Then the next day, we do the supply chains to admire. And Peter Balsdorf is going to join me. Peter is executive vice president at ASCM, and we're going to talk about why supply chains lacked resiliency starting in 2014 when 26 of the 28 industry sectors really struggled for performance. And we talk a lot about supply chain excellence, but if you look at the industry performance, we saw a marked decline in our ability to manage margin and inventory about that period of time. And while people may associate that with the pandemic, the decay in supply chain performance actually started in about 2014. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to celebrate two winners, Western Digital and Dollar General. And I love Dollar General's story around new analytics. And not only have they adopted new analytics, but they really use it and test and learn in the store. Great case study. And then the afternoon is all about rethinking analytics. How we free data from the data jail of relational databases and use telematics and unstructured data, sense and respond, build outside in processes, and really challenge the basis of our processes as we know it today. And then the third day is about reimagining transportation. So I have a trucker who's coming. She leads Real Women in Trucking, and she's going to talk about,
Nice.
the data from the truckers about who's a good shipper and what's a good shipper. And then we're going to have a presentation on how we could use robotics and Hyperloop to manage the first mile off the ships. And then we're
Yeah.
going to end with a discussion on leadership by Daryl Edwards, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Lazy Boy. And I actually met Daryl when I was working on my doctoral work. And Daryl's a great leader in building talent and people. We will archive all the presentations and we'll put them on our event site because our goal is people give to us, we give back to them, we don't charge. And, we are just trying to help business leaders to imagine the future because we believe digital supply chain transformation is rethinking the atoms and electrons of the supply chain.
Mhm. It's so true. And honestly, that lineup sounds amazing. Catherine said the event sounds incredible, took the words right out of my mouth. And so hopefully I'll be able to come next year because I'd love to learn about all of this. We've talked about Hyperloop on this show, and it's an incredible next step for that first mile. It'll be
Yes,
interesting how they're going to be able to use it. So
right.
I'd be interested in getting access to that and maybe seeing that later on.
Absolutely.
All right. So I just want to say hi because we've got Daniel Stanton over on my personal LinkedIn page. We've got a few others that have joined us over there as well. We've got Chris, we've got um, Daniel, and we've got a lot of people that are coming on the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn pages as well. All right, so let's get into our topics for today. So we asked a question last week, and let me tell you guys, this thing blew up, and we had so many people asking us why we were asking this in our poll. It kind of came up in the sports world, and I have to find it again. So just give me a second because I had it up and then all of a sudden LinkedIn went kind of wonky on me. But it came up in the sports world, and we thought that we would ask this to the supply chain community because we really wanted to know what everybody thought. Here it is. Okay, so the poll that we asked you guys was, is a hot dog a sandwich? So we had 39 impressions of this poll. We had over 1,000 votes. 60% of you said no. 30% of you said yes. 10% of you said, I don't eat hot dogs. And then we had a bunch of comments about the history of hot dogs, and people went into all sorts of explanations as to why they think it's a sandwich, why they don't think it's a sandwich. Like, the whole thing is incredible. So you guys need to go and check it out. AJ, if you can put the link in the comments, that would be great. One of the questions that we did get was, how does this relate to supply chain? Well, how it relates to supply chain really dives into data classification. Because if you're going to classify a hot dog and somebody thinks it's a sandwich and somebody doesn't think that it's a sandwich, then you're going to have two classifications for one product, and that's what we're trying to get away from. So Laura, I know I'm sort of springing this on you because I didn't send you this in advance, but what do you think about this discussion?
I think it's a wonderful example of taxonomy and the need for a unified data model. So one of the things we're going to talk about at our conference is how we've put data into relational databases, and it's got to be really pristine and we lose the context. So, let me use an analogy. What is an each, right? An each can be a candy bar by the checkout aisle. It can be a 6-pack and can be a 12-pack, and it can be the same candy bar. And so as you think about taxonomy and you think about unified data models, it's really a great case study for non-SQL and building unified data models that allow us to have agility and to learn and to get outside of black and white classifications.
See, this is why I love supply chain. I mean, the fact that we can take a hot dog, we can turn it into a supply chain issue is just absolutely amazing. So, thank you to everybody who commented on that post. Thank you, Laura, for that insight as well. We have about a minute and a half. So, we are going to go to my thoughts and coffee post. And this happened on Sunday. And the post was about doing more of what you love. And I think, a lot of times we spend so much time working. As an entrepreneur, Laura, you know as well as I do, we are spending more hours than most people working on our business, working in our business. And so you really have to love what you do. So, how did you get into what you do? What do you love about what you do? And what sort of keeps you motivated?
I love learning. I love learning from other people. I love telling stories. I have really loved learning how to write. What is amazing to me in my job is when I sit down and I write the supply chain shaman each week, which started out as kind of a laborious task, but now is really fun. It's amazing to me how words flow from my fingers and in a way that I'm really not conscious of as I try to tell the stories of what I learned from supply chain leaders. And I like to think that at the end of the day, I help people.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people have said to me, I don't make money doing the things that I love. And I like to challenge that a little bit because I think that if we sit down and we really write down what it is that we're good at, what it is that we like to do, and what it is that we don't like to do, there's a lot of intersectionality, especially with the opportunity that's out there right now in business. I think that we can find a way to really make money doing the things that we love. It took me a while, right? Because I only really just started doing this about 4 years ago. And it took me a while to get there, but it's all about a journey. It's not the destination. It's not a destination. It's a journey, right? Your life is a journey. And so I would say there's a lot of different paths and open doors and opportunities. Take them because you never know what you're going to like to do or not like to do unless you try. And so that would be my 2 cents on that. So thank you for that insight. Now we're going to get to our supply chain articles. So the first article is about satellites. Now bear with me, guys, because you're going to be like, why is this a supply chain issue? Well, we're talking about logistics and supply chain in space a lot more. And three things came out of this article for me. One was that satellites are going to help predict supply chain disruptions. They already are saying that they can predict a pandemic, they can predict weather patterns. Number two, they're talking about cargo delivery to space stations, which has to do with logistics and has to do with supply chain. And then they're also talking about helping the planet. And obviously, supply chains are a big, big part of that. So, Laura, when you saw this article, what were your thoughts on satellites and how they pertain to supply chain? I'm sure you're going to be talking about some of this stuff at your event.
Well, the global supply chain started with the cables under the sea. And I think that the enhancement of the digital supply chain is really all about the satellites. And I give thanks for everything the satellites are doing for us today, whether it's GPS or helping us with pattern recognition and first mile delivery or helping us with weather patterns. I'm amazed at how much better we are at weather and how much better we are at predicting weather patterns. And I think that our ability to adapt and learn with satellites is just going to increase as we really think about how do we use the signals.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was they were talking about how SpaceX is delivering satellites into space by a reusable rocket. So we're not just thinking about how we deliver satellites into space, which again is logistics and a big part of supply chain, but we're also thinking about the mechanisms of the transportation that is being used and how it's being reused. So I think it's really interesting the mindset of the people or the organizations that are looking at space logistics. And I think it all starts with these satellites and how we're delivering them into space. But the fact that they're using a reusable rocket really means that we're thinking about how we can take care of space, maybe in ways that we weren't able to take care of the Earth through supply chain and through logistics.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot of pollution in the atmosphere around satellites because we really didn't design for reuse. And so one of our struggles is what do we do with that pollution? And, that brings a lot of consciousness around pollution, whether it's plastic in oceans or, the satellites in
Yeah.
the atmosphere around reuse. And I think it gets us into a lot of discussions around demanufacturing, remanufacturing, and, really thinking more holistically.
Can you imagine manufacturing? I mean, we're all talking about where we're going to put our manufacturing facilities. I mean, I don't know in my lifetime if we'll see a manufacturing facility in space, but it could happen the way that we're going.
Oh, it definitely will happen.
You-
And, a lot of unique zero gravity capabilities, are in space. And I love just the spin-off technologies that come from that kind of innovation. I mean, we wouldn't have, Gore-Tex or, Teflon without, some of the early space exploration.
Oh,
So
it's true.
I, I'm a big advocate, a big fan. I always dreamed of going to space, but not going to happen for this old gal.
Oh, well, Audrey, who's usually my guest here, she wants to go to space too. She's saving up her money. Instead of buying a house, she wants to go to space. So maybe you guys can go together and then we can talk about it on Thoughts and Coffee of how supply chain is making it to space. But one other thing that I wanted to mention, there's a company called Trade in Space, and they talk about it in this article, and they're using satellites to help coffee farmers and helping them with their supply chains. So again, it's coming fast and furious. We're going to be able to utilize these satellites to help predict supply chain disruptions and also potentially help manage supply chains as well, which is really, really exciting. So before we go on to our next article, I just want to say hi to a couple of people over on my personal page. We've got Chris Harding, Bali. We've got Crystal as well. Thank you guys all. And Victor from Dublin as well. Thank you guys all for joining us today. All right, so our next article, so we're talking about climate change, and I think that this is a really good question. So will climate change affect supply chains more than the pandemic? Well, that's a question that I have for you, Laura, but just to put it into perspective, this article talks about how wildfires are affecting lumber supply chains. Brazil is in a drought right now, and that's affecting coffee supply chains. And the California water shortage is affecting rice supply chain. So yes, if you like sushi, the water source shortages in California are affecting sushi and affecting the rice supply chain. And they're talking about how climate change will also disrupt workplaces by $2 trillion by 2030. So these are some really, really incredible numbers, some really incredible things when you think about supply chains. I mean, you look at a pen or you think about lumber, and you don't necessarily sometimes correlate the two. So, what do you think about this, Laura? Will climate change affect supply chains more than the pandemic? Because the pandemic has affected us greatly.
Well, I'm hoping the pandemic helps us to really jumpstart building better. And I really struggle with the fact that 93% of companies have a glossy brochure on their website about how they're going to be sustainable, but only 22% actually own their networks and manage the impact on the planet in their networks. We have been very slow to build networks.
Mhm.
But the pandemic, I think, is a good opportunity for us to think about just how self-serving and enterprise-centric supply chains are today, because they're very functional. They've actually gone backwards in the last decade in terms of people within the organization to be able to work together. And we need to be outside in. We need to be sensing, and we need to really manage our outputs. 40% of the trucks still roll down the road empty. What a travesty.
Yeah.
If you look at all of the big ocean liners outside of Long Beach, they're burning fuels. And if you look at the plastic in the ocean, right, we are not designing the supply chain for the third moment of truth. So the first moment of truth, is it available? Second is, are we delighted? The third is it sustainable? Can I reclaim the materials? Can I demanufacture? Can I be earth friendly? And I really am very frustrated that everybody's got these beautiful, brochures, but when push comes to shove and you ask them about landfills and fair labor and carbon, we're not walking the talk. And I really want us to do a step change. And I'm hoping the pandemic brings an awareness that we really need to walk the talk and change what we do, because we've got to unlearn supply chain practices to rethink how we manage that third moment of truth and how we're earth friendly, because we're not today.
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree with you. And in this article, they also talk about emissions. And I'm kind of like, will just cutting emissions help? And I think, alone it will help, but it won't help as much as we need. Like you said, there's a couple of other things that we need to think about. We need to think about recycling, and we need to think about reusability of the products, and not just shipping products because people want the products shipped to them. I think one other thing that came out of this article that I thought was interesting is that MIT did a study on mint for Colgate. And they said to mitigate their risk from climate change, they actually need to look 20 years down the road on just the mint for their products. And so if you think about the products that Colgate has, and they have an array of products. So I think the mint we're talking about is probably in their toothpaste, but the different components that go into that toothpaste, and how we need to look that far in advance to mitigate some of these risks because of climate change is incredible to me.
Yeah, but it's real. I mean,
Mhm.
let's look at the semiconductor issue. Everybody's like, wow, we've got a
Yeah.
semiconductor problem. No, we've got a semiconductor opportunity. You know, what happened was the automotive companies weren't good at forecasting their needs and really being a good supplier, and owner and brand owner in the value network. And so now we don't have chips. But if we look at supply, our supply is going to be of lower grade
Mhm.
because we've used a lot of the prime grades. And we really need to be looking at demanufacturing and recycling and redefining manufacturing and really asking ourselves, do we need to produce this product? Or can it be a service? Or can it be 3D printed? Because we entered the pandemic with 21 more days of inventory than we had at the Great Recession in 2007. And when you think about 21 more days of inventory in all these warehouses with all the water runoff, you cannot drive up a major interstate without seeing a distribution center either side of the road. That is pollution, and that inventory that's not moving is not sustainable, right? Because a lot of it goes into landfills, and we're not good at form and function of inventory, and we're not good at the design of supply chains. Only 9% of companies actively design their supply chains. So when we think about corporate social responsibility, the impact is going to be so huge, it's hard to even conceive. What I worry about is the dislocation of people. Today we have a planet that is fairly inhabitable in most places, but corporate social responsibility issues are going to cause more drought, more
Yeah.
fire, and more people that are moving. And I think we're going to have unrest. And, it isn't just supply chain, it's our ability to live life. And I worry what we're passing on to our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah.
And supply chains and supply chain ethics are at the core of doing something to stop this. And what really frustrates me is we have a lot of pretty talk, a lot of pretty pictures, but we're really not driving the actions that I think we need to.
Absolutely. And you nailed it on the head. Like, we need to do something about that now. And supply chainers, I mean, we're problem solvers. And we're at the core of this issue. And I think we do need to take more action, but we also need to empower our people and our organizations to do better and to take that action. I think sometimes we're held back in a variety of different ways. And so we need to make sure that we focus on that. So thank you for that. We've got one more article and we've got 2 minutes left. So we got to do this fairly quickly.
Okay.
This article I thought was thoughts and coffee worthy because it was from a Canadian bank, and they're talking about out of stock, why supply chains are still disrupted, which I thought was amazing. I mean, we've heard supply chain and procurement come out of politicians' mouths over the last couple of months. Now banks are getting involved. And so they're talking about all the shortages that we've talked about. And I'm hoping that satellites, what we talked about in the first article, are also going to help us with that sustainability initiative and give us more data, right? We're already getting a lot of data, but I'm hoping we can get some more data from the satellites as well. But these are the disruptions that they're talking about. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this to the forefront for you, Laura, is I wanted to see what of these disruptions that they're listing are you going to be talking about and focusing on at your event? Because it's one thing for a bank to talk about it. We see the bullwhip effect there. You already talked about the semiconductor. We're hearing about just in time versus just in case. What are you going to be talking about? What should be people be focusing on from this list?
Well, I think all of the shortages are a symptom of inside out processes. Basically, we cannot do bidirectional orchestration across source, make, and deliver because we single thread planning through distribution requirements planning, through manufacturing, and through transportation. DRP and transportation models are as different as Canada is from Vietnam. And so our ability to move signals across the enterprise and sense is just not there. So we're surrounded by this wealth of data that doesn't fit in our current architectures and our current processes. And we must own all of the miles, the first mile, the middle mile, the end mile, and sense it and adapt. And today's architectures and processes don't allow us to do that. So we're going to be working on Project Zebra, which is on outside in processes of how do we use telematic signals, how do we use channel data, how do we really get to unstructured text awareness, how do we listen and learn, and how do we redefine the supply chain architectures to sense. Today's supply chains respond, and they respond on a latent signal, so we're on a big back foot. And if we can go outside in and we can use all the market data and we can do bidirectional orchestration, then we have a lot better chance to not have all this inventory in all these warehouses and to be able to own reliability on each of the miles and to be able to better serve customers. And that's what we're going to talk about, our tests and our work for the last year on what we call Project Zebra.
Amazing. Laura, I love you. Thank you so much for coming on. The insights that you have provided us today have been incredible. I wish you all the best of luck in your event next week. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. And remember, Audrey will be back next week to talk about her trip to the US because she's in the US this week. So can't wait to share all of that with you, and have a great week, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.